So this is finally the end of our great sweep of history, and today's text neatly summarized it. The readings we've been doing since the beginning of the summer, from Abraham and Isaac, Jacob and Joshua, Joseph, through slavery and Exodus, and the people now are firmly established in the Promised Land, and it's already now nearly the end of Joshua's life. Now, who was Joshua again? So we mentioned him only briefly before. Soon after leaving Egypt, like almost immediately after leaving Egypt, Joshua led those wandering Israelites to victory when they were attacked by the Amalekites, which is a detail I wouldn't blame you for not remembering. But you might remember how Joshua led them to victory. Was it his brilliant strategy? Not really. So when Moses held up his arms, the Israelites began winning the battle, and when he put them down, they began to lose. And so when Moses was too tired to hold his hands up in the air, two men stood alongside of him and held his hand in the air, and so that's how Joshua was victorious. So that is this same Joshua. So post-Ten Commandments and Golden Calf debacle, 40 years later, Moses stood on top of a mountain and finally saw the land they were traveling toward forever. It was stretched out in front of them as far as he could see. And then he died on that very spot. It was now up to Joshua and Caleb to lead the people into the land. And so why those two? So according to Scripture, they were the only two who never once doubted. All those complaints about food and water and the lack of watermelons and weren't there enough graves in Egypt for us to die in comfort? Well, Joshua and Caleb were selected to lead the people into the Promised Land because they were the only two who didn't complain along the way and believed that one day they would indeed reach the Promised Land. They believed God would provide. And Joshua and Caleb are also the only two people alive who had once been slaves in Egypt. So be clear along the way. Every other single person that escaped Egypt died, which along with Moses not entering seems quite unfair. But as I've said before, our call is faithfulness to the journey, not the destination. But wait a minute. All the people died along the way. So how many people would that be? And I honestly have never really given this any thought because, storytelling deals with search for meaning, not the recitation of facts. But so first, how many people escaped from Egypt? And as I try to imagine a group of people crammed up against the side of the Reed Sea before it opened and they could walk through on dry ground, how many, what number seems reasonable? Well, maybe a few hundred or 1,000 or two. Or as I imagine them camping out overnight under the stars, or how many angry voices demanded water and complained that they were hungry? Might it have been maybe 5,000? And then I think, well, how many quail descended at supper time every night? Are we talking about maybe more than 10,000 dead birds every night after night for 40 years? Well, the Bible actually does give us a number. In Exodus 12:27, the number who escaped was 600,000 men, plus women and children. And the book of Numbers makes it even more specific, 603,550, not 51. Which one scholar estimated would be about 2.5 to 3 million total men, women, and children. I thought, well, let's imagine this. Let's use a conservative estimate, and let's imagine moving the entire population of San Diego, 1.4 million people, to Sacramento, but not up the freeway, because first you have to go to Las Vegas, through the Salton Sea, and then up to San Francisco, and then back down to Yuma and over to Los Angeles before getting to Sacramento. and enough water in Barstow for 1.4 million people, and everywhere else in the desert. However, here's this image, zigzagged along the way, all but two, of 1.4 million San Diegans lay dead. Would that be like bodies littered all along the way, although they would have been buried? That kind of paints a different picture of these moving through the land nomads. But also, in the meantime, I mean, these people were dropping dead along the way, but tens of thousands of babies were born who grew up, adding another 10,000 babies on top of that. But I have to say, I can't quite get past 1 million dead quail every night for 14,600 nights. Just think of the logistics of leftover quail bones alone. And the sewage. But okay, now I've gone down a rabbit hole. It's hard not to focus on whether it's logical, but what is in fact its lesson. So back to today's story. Of all the people who now stood in front of Joshua, none of them had the personal experience of freedom from slavery, although they would have heard the stories of their parents and grandparents. They wouldn't have known how hard it is to maintain and sustain a covenant relationship with God through hunger and uncertainty and thirst and never having a place that they knew that night would finally be their home. And Joshua was concerned with these people that they didn't really understand all that was expected of them as the people of God now that things were easier. Talitha Arnold is the pastor of United Church of Santa Fe, and she said if she were to be as blunt as Joshua when presenting parents with the choice to baptize their child, she would get rid of the wimpy declaration in our book of worship. Do you promise to grow with this child in the Christian faith and offer them the nurture of the Christian church? Instead, I'd ask them in front of God and the whole congregation, do you promise to get them out of bed, dressed, here every morning for the next 18 years, even when you've had a long night, or you'd rather sleep in, or there's a soccer match, or when that darling infant has grown into a surly, tattooed teenager who thinks church is dumb? Or how about a membership vow like this, instead of theological niceties like fellowship and supporting one another on a shared discovery of spiritual gifts? How about, can you stick with this church when it isn't as interesting anymore? And can you promise not to complain when a request for money to fix the roof comes right after the special offering for hurricane relief during the pledge campaign for the next year that comes just as someone has asked you to move tables for the upcoming rummage sale for which you are supposed to both provide items as well as buy someone else's discarded items? And can you commit to forgiving the minister for a few bad sermons in a row, or worse, an accidental, unkind word? Can you stick with people who sometimes get on your last nerve? And can you remain faithful through nearly 2 years of services on Zoom instead of in person? That one's kind of real, isn't it? So imagine someone who wishes to join the church. They've fully considered the depth of their commitment. They stand up for the membership ceremony and answer the questions, yes, I can. And imagine the minister saying, no, you can't. You will fail. And walks away and leaving you uncertain what to do other than to sit back down. But will you stand back up and exclaim, yes, I can? And now you are ready. Faithfulness to God is easy when things are going our way, when we like how things are going, but not so much when things in our lives keep getting harder and our losses are piling up and God feels very distant. Faithfulness to God is not easy when things are not going our way. And so the people are finally now living in this place that was once just a promise. These are much easier times. And so I'm curious about the urgency to Joshua's questions. Once and for all, he urges, choose this day whom you will serve. Perhaps he could have said, choose every day, because no decision is ever done and over at the moment it's made, right? We grow and change, and the people around us grow and change, and sometimes they change into even more difficult people, and we do too. But perhaps choosing this day is knowing we must yet choose 1,000 and more times in our lives. But choose what? Events in the world that are both good and horrible can instantly change our trajectory. Make your lifetime choice to go deeper each day instead of on to the next thing. When we say, this is too hard, or this is no fun anymore, make your lifetime choice to choose every day, not to go somewhere else, but to go deeper into whatever communities we belong to and into God's very self. But the faith journey is not so much forward to something like a promised land or heaven. The faith journey is a call deeper within someone, deeper into our God, to deepen our love of neighbor without giving up self, and to deepen our love of self without becoming self-centered. But without going deeper, we risk the instability of shallow faith. And how will we handle it when things keep getting harder and our losses keep piling up and God feels very distant? Choosing to go deeper may be difficult to embrace for people who are goal-oriented, success-driven, motivated by results kind of people. Because how do you measure? How do you measure going deeper? How do you win a trophy for depth of spirit and kindness and love? And it may be difficult for those who think self-sufficiency means I can do this all by myself. And it may be difficult for people always seeking an elusive happiness that it seems like everyone else is enjoying. These are the examples of the foreign gods we have to give up. These are the gods that compete with our God. And so choose this day whom you will serve. And Joshua says, as for me and my house, we will choose the Lord, the God of Israel. And if we choose God, well then what? So for the last several months, I've been hearing God, or feeling like God is saying, calling us to three things: a deeper faith, deeper relationships, and a greater impact. So deeper faith through means we have yet to fully explore, but one has been this deep dive into the great sweep of history that we have been exploring since this summer. We have really dug into this story instead of bounced around among many. And I hope that's helped us have a deeper appreciation and understanding of our faith that is grounded and rooted in the Bible, as well as deeper relationships with others in the church, our neighbors around the church and our neighbors around our homes, deeper relationship with God and Jesus and the Spirit. That was one of the intentions behind our All Generations weekend at Pilgrim Pines, a real deep dive into relationships, and all of our other events. And I hear God calling us not to do more things, but to do the things we do with greater depth, which is how we have a greater impact. But all of that is dependent on a deeper faith and deeper relationships, because you don't seek a greater impact first. So it's too soon for me to ask, can you commit to a deeper faith? Or can you commit to pursuing deeper relationships? And can you commit to having a greater impact? You might want to. You might want to say, yes, but it's too soon, because if you say, yes, I can, I'd have to say, no, you can't. You'll fail at it. But when we fully grasp what God is indeed calling forth from us, to be even more rooted and grounded in God's love, I'm excited to find out what will happen.